Hello and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny, bring you guys some more topics around the NFL, some discussions, some debates that I wanted to get into, and just some overall new news that I have found recently in just the social media area and just looking up some articles and reports that have been going on. As usual, I'll start with the Chip Shot segment. Some more Cowboys have made headlines talking about their past season and just how they think they would fix it. And it caused a big storm, a big commotion in the media world, so I wanted to talk about that. I also wanted to bring up, similarly to that, CJ Stroud on some comments that he made back during Super Bowl week, that media week that the players have to practice, train at the location of the Super Bowl, and everybody else that's in the Pro Bowl or not involved in the game can go and do media, participate in the Pro Bowl and stuff like that. He made some comments on Justin Fields on a quick interview, a quick snippet that I saw just recently that I didn't see before, and I thought it was pretty interesting. After that, we'll talk about the Vikings contract negotiations with Kirk Cousins and why recent reports have suggested that those negotiations could stall for a reason that I will talk about later on, and what to make of it and potentially justify that issue that is causing the stall between the contract negotiations. In the second half of the show, I'll talk about more free agency, this time focusing on the running backs and the running back market, what kind of contracts some of the top guys could potentially be looking at, and again, what it would mean for them, some kind of reaction to those contract negotiations and what the market kind of looks like for a Saquon Barkley, a Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, guys like that, even Austin Eckler as well. And the last part of the show, I will be giving more of an open discussion of sorts, kind of like I like ending the shows with an open topic, discussing whether or not the Chicago Bears gave Justin Fields, in all honesty, a fair chance at being their quarterback. Basically, who's more at fault for this presumably inevitable fallout that we're going to see here in the offseason with the Bears picking number one. The consensus is that they're going to get Caleb Williams, and it'll just mean the end of Justin Fields in Chicago, and why I believe maybe the Bears had more to play in it for this whole project scenario not working out in the end. But before we dive into the Chip Shot segment, I wanted to remind you guys to please like and follow the show, but to also remind you guys that we get a lot of questions from viewers during the show. So to make sure your question is seen, please use the tip and donations link running across the ticker down there and to my left. With any questions that you may have, the tip and donations link, if you're not able to see it, is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, the tip and donations link is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. This just makes sure I get to see your question gets put to the top of the list, and I'm able to engage with you guys in anything that you might have comments on or anything like that. Not only that, it's a huge help for not only this show, but the network as well, and all the shows that are going on throughout the network and channel as well. But with that being said, we can jump into the first segment, the Chip Shot segment. Jumping straight into it, it's Micah Parsons, and this time Derek Lawrence featuring in some comments made just a few days ago, or actually DeMarcus Lawrence's comments made back from Super Bowl week, that media week like I mentioned, and Michael Parsons' reaction to what he said. So DeMarcus Lawrence was on First Take with Shannon Sharpe and Stephen A. Smith, and basically Shannon Sharpe just asked him right off the bat, why do you think the Cowboys aren't here in this moment? Why aren't they getting ready to play a Super Bowl? And DeMarcus Lawrence, his response was, the direct quote was, I think the main thing is we were burnt out. Long season, team dominantly healthy throughout the whole season. The legs get tired. And also, you got to give hats off to Green Bay. Seems pretty harmless right in the moment for anybody that saw it live or just reacting to it from me reading it there. But it seemed to have picked up some whirlwind, some traction over a few weeks, because at the same time, just a few days after that, I believe, Micah Parsons was on the Stephen A. Smith show, and Stephen A. Smith asked him about those comments from DeMarcus Lawrence and what he thought about it, and Micah Parsons' response to that was, don't get me wrong, yes, I agree the teams play us like the Super Bowl. We are the Dallas Cowboys, but in the end, that's not a good enough reason or excuse to say that publicly. And then he goes on to say, once that regular season ends and we get into the playoffs, you're supposed to get rejuvenated. And another quote that kind of connects to that and just this whole topic of culture and the guys that they have in the locker room, Micah Parsons said, and that's where I want to dive into the players that we got to change. Now, he didn't call out DeMarcus Lawrence or anything directly and say that he was completely wrong in saying that. I'm not sure specifically how Stephen A. Directed the question at him, but he must have, if he didn't mention DeMarcus Lawrence's name, he must have mentioned the idea of some players mentioning that they could be tired and trying to get Micah's response to that. And just, again, from my perspective, seeing that, talking about the Cowboys these last few days, and just comments that Micah has been making, at some point, it comes to a point where Micah, I get it that he's been on these shows. There's nothing else really to do. You're in the offseason, right at the start of the offseason. You're talking on these interviews, these shows, but at some point, because it's just fresh off the season, at some point I think you'd have to get tired of it, because you always have people asking you about the Cowboys this, the locker room, always almost questioning the character from the Cowboys. And at some point I just think Michael Parsons would get tired of that and having to answer the same question over and over again. And even some of the reactions to Micah's comments there were just from older guys that have played the game, former players that now you see in the media, Bart Scott being one of them, Louis Riddick, just saying things like he's acting more like the media than he is a player. You understand that he is young, but they took it to a point where they were saying he's just gotta not shut up and play, but just quit all the media, quit everything, and just show it through his actions that he is really about this change, that he is bringing up good points, that he wants guys in the locker room that are committed, that are able to hone in on the playoffs and really absorb the moment, not run away from it. That's not a bad thing to do, but you can't say it publicly and almost out DeMarcus Lawrence for responding to the way you did and the way he answered the question, directly saying that if you're tired, that's not a good enough reason. I think you could have worded it better, and I think it's not only gonna just harm them, because I'm talking about it today. I've talked about it for the last few days, but you can only imagine the national media, everybody else reacting to it, and they're probably gonna ask him about this through training camp and probably into the season. So at some point, I think just Michael Parsons has to realize that, yes, it's good to voice these issues out loud. Mostly it should be to your teammates in the locker room, but don't let the media get a sneak peek into the locker room and get more exposure to some things that should be kept in-house than they than they should already, because they're already in locker rooms and already speculating stuff. Don't give them more information that is basically unnecessary at this point of the season to kind of run with and make narratives on and just create more distractions for the Cowboys. But that was one thing. That was another part of the Cowboys offseason drama. And the other thing I wanted to talk about on this segment was CJ Stroud. And again, another interview during Media Week of the Super Bowl. They asked CJ Stroud what he thinks about Justin Fields, what he's going to do this offseason with the Bears. Or the question was, what does he believe the Bears are going to do with the number one pick? And he asked, who's their quarterback? They said Justin Fields. And he said they should keep him. They should keep him if they're smart, but And then the reporter said, they're the Bears. CJ Stroud didn't say that, but the reporter kind of finished off the thought that he was saying when he meant they should keep him if they're smart, but And he didn't say the Bears, but it was implied. And I think that just speaks to not only how his peers feel about him, Justin Fields, but obviously CJ Stroud's been close to Justin Fields in that locker room there at Ohio State. They've got a close connection. CJ Stroud playing there after Justin Fields. And that quote in and itself shows me that he can't be the only player and only peer of Justin Fields or only person related to the NFL that feels this way about Justin Fields. I think a lot has been made about the Bears and having the number one pick again and not missing out on that generational type of player talent that is Caleb Williams. But I'll talk about it more in the last segment, but this just kind of kicks off everything. If CJ Stroud feels like this about Justin Fields, someone who plays the same position as him, has seen him work, has seen his work ethic, the talent that this guy has, Justin Fields, you can't tell me that anybody else doesn't feel like this. And I'm not saying the Bears are making a huge mistake. It could all work out for them if Caleb Williams plays great. I think he's a great player. But, at the same time, I just feel like a lot of this fallout, this divorce between Justin Fields and the Bears has fallen on Justin Fields. And a lot of people may not be avid fans of football, don't watch Justin Fields, don't really know much about him. They see these things and they think, oh, Justin Fields is just bad, that it was a bad draft pick, and it was his fault that he didn't work out there, where it could have been other factors that I'm going to get into later. But yeah, at the same time, it's a delicate subject because, other players feel some way about Justin. Justin feels a way about, the Bears, and the Bears might have a decision made already, they might not, but this just adds more talking points. You get other players' perspectives, and I mentioned CJ Stroud's comments, but there must be other people out there that would vouch for Justin Fields in this scenario that a lot of people don't know what the Bears will do. The consensus is they might draft the quarterback, Caleb Williams, but it's just interesting to see other players come out and support Justin and not make it so like a foregone conclusion to everybody that this was just Justin's fault. And in my opinion, I think he still has more to give, but we will see if that's with the Bears or with someone else based on what the Bears will do with that. But that'll be it for the Chip Shot segment of the show. I will be going to a short break right now, and on the other side of the break, I will be talking about Kirk Cousins, his free agency status, and some reports suggesting that it might not be all fun and roses for Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings to renegotiate a contract based on certain factors that could alter that process. So don't go anywhere. On the other side of this break, I will bring you more topics around the NFL and Minnesota and Kirk Cousins.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign. the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the losing fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live, I choose to dip, you choose to fight, or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. We're back to talk about the second topic I have lined up for you guys today. But if you missed that first topic in the first 15 minutes of the show, I recap some of the Chip Shot segments and going over some comments made by the Cowboys and a comment made by CJ Stroud on the whole Justin Fields scenario issue going on with the Chicago Bears. But now I wanted to jump into the second segment that is revolved around Kirk Cousins and the Vikings and contract negotiations, because I think the major feeling around the league was that these two could get a deal done because of the way last season ended. You know, Kirk was on fire. He threw 18 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in the little games that he played before he ruptured his Achilles. And I just think that in that moment, once you knew the severity of the injury and everything like that, I feel like people felt that this, knowing that he was going to be a free agent, felt that this scenario could have been fixed pretty quickly just because it ended pretty fast for Kirk Cousins, and it felt that the Vikings missed a good opportunity the way that Kirk Cousins was playing this season, arguably the best in his career. He was throwing for 291.5 yards per game. That's the highest he's thrown for since 2016. And the way it was going, I know Justin Jefferson was hurt, but once, they got back on the same page, everyone, or at least I thought that it was only a matter of time before they started getting Justin Jefferson involved, and, Kirk Cousins gets hurt, then you got to roll with Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins in there at some point, and it never really got going for the Vikings. It was a missed opportunity on a pretty decent start to their season, but now, like I mentioned, Kirk Cousins is a free agent, and one of the higher sought after free agents, I would think, because if you look at the names that could be available, it's him, Baker Mayfield, Ryan Tannehill, Russell Wilson now, Justin Fields, and whatever's going to happen with him. I think Kirk or Baker could be one of the more stable guys and reliable players that you'd want to sign if you're a team in that position. And because of not only how he was playing, but he's only 35. If you need a year or two even from Kirk Cousins, from any quarterback, I think he gives you the best chance of doing that. Granted, if you have the system already, great players around him, specifically a good O-line to keep him protected from preventing any other injuries, I think could be a good thing for any team if they wanted to get Kirk Cousins. But a report by Sports Illustrated read that the Vikings really like Kirk Cousins, but they won't hand him a fully guaranteed deal like he's had in previous years. And SpotRack predicts that Cousins is around the range of getting a 2-year deal with a 39.3 annual value, just outside the top 10 quarterbacks or highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. But it's going to be tough. That amount of money might not be the issue. It's just the fully guaranteed part of it. The incentives, the smaller details in a contract that could be an issue here, because I don't think the Vikings will have a problem paying Kirk Cousins that money. It's just depending on, now he's getting older. An Achilles injury is a pretty serious injury, not only just for any player, but for someone closer to the end than he is the beginning and prime years of his career. Coming off of that, seeing that they also have to pay Justin Jefferson a lot of money because he made some comments, or some reports came out that they believe Justin Jefferson would want to reset the wide receiver market, and the top earner right now is Tyreek Hill at $30 million per year. And if you think Justin Jefferson doesn't think he's the best receiver in the league and deserves that amount of money or more, you'd be crazy to think that, because Justin Jefferson has proven to be one of the top 3 receivers in the league at his best, at his healthiest. It was a shame he wasn't able to prove that this past year because of some of the injuries he was dealing with, but you have to pay Justin Jefferson down the line. You have some free agents this coming season, and then not to mention the other season. And this is where the decision-making comes in for the Vikings and for Kirk Cousins, because, I mentioned the Achilles injury, and, that security that the Vikings might not feel with Kirk Cousins coming off of that injury. On the other hand, Kirk Cousins might feel that guaranteed money now is even more vital to him, because his health, like any other players, is their most important thing to them. And he wants to make sure that if something bad does happen to him, he suffers another injury, his money, his paycheck doesn't suffer from that as well, because obviously you can't control the injuries, and he wants to get assurance on his end as well. It's just going to come down if the Vikings feel like he's earned it. And, Kirk Cousins has been there for about 6 years now. I think he's going into his 7th year. And, he has made his mark there. There is some emotional ties, connections with him and the organization because of some success that he's had there, taking them to the playoffs and whatnot. Historically, he's 3rd all-time in Vikings wins, and he's top 3, at least top 5 in wins, or not wins, in passing touchdowns and just some other accolades like that. So it's really give and take right now at this moment between the Vikings and Kirk Cousins. If they weren't to get a deal done, I think overall it might be worse for the Vikings if they weren't able to negotiate some sort of deal with Kirk Cousins, because, like I mentioned, Justin Jefferson is tied with Kirk Cousins now. He's the quarterback that he's played with his entire career, and if you're trying to sell Justin Jefferson to the idea of staying here, making this your home for as long as possible, extending your stay with the Vikings past your rookie deal, there's no issue with the Vikings giving him his money. I'm sure they'd be willing to give him probably as much money as he wants, but will Justin Jefferson be fully on board with what they're building here, the project, the group of players, the roster, the coaching staff? Is he going to be on board if they're not able to assure him a quarterback that could make him look better? At the end of the day, if you don't have a high-level quarterback playing with a receiver the caliber of Justin Fields, the receiver is going to not benefit a lot more or a lot less than the quarterback. And then after that, it just affects not only how the league views them, but their future negotiations, their future things that they can bring to the table. If they were to negotiate another deal, if they can't put up the numbers because they're in a bad situation, it's harder for them to get paid later on. So that's a few things that you have to think about here if you're the Vikings, if you're thinking about, is Kirk Cousins really expendable? Is he really just another guy that we can find to have success with Justin Fields or Justin Jefferson? Because at the end of the day, like I mentioned, those other guys, those other free agents, Baker Mayfield, I think he could be very good with Minnesota, and he might actually cost a little bit less than Kirk Cousins. But again, it's that process of not fully tearing it down and restarting with Justin Jefferson and the offense and building an offense. Now with Baker, who's a little bit more mobile, might have a little bit more arm talent, arm strength than Kirk Cousins, finding that rhythm with him, Justin Jefferson, and just the rest of the offense and playing off of that. Are they going to have the level of success that they had, 2 seasons now, with them trying to get into the playoffs now more? The NFC North is only getting better, in my opinion, regardless if Justin Fields stays with the Bears or if they get Caleb Williams. The Lions are the presumably favorite, I would assume right now, to win the NFC North, but Everyone saw how the Packers played with Jordan Love, how he wasn't afraid of the spotlight. He stepped up in the biggest of moments, and his inexperience costed him in the moment against the 49ers. But you can only assume he's going to get better. Their roster is young. They have a lot of cap space, and they have a lot of draft picks coming up in this year's draft to only improve that team that they had going. Get Jordan Love some more playmakers, some more old linemen to protect him, and I think the rest he can do himself. Kind of carry them to the tougher wins just based on the talent and poise he showed in the playoffs. And if you're the Vikings now, you don't want to be left behind, or you don't want to be in a scenario like the Bears trying to find your franchise guy, or not settling down on a franchise guy and being left behind while everybody else gets successful, and you have a top tier wide receiver as well on your roster, so you don't want his talents to go to waste and then him eventually moving on, and then you not only don't get Kirk Cousins in that moment, but you also end up losing Justin Jefferson as well. All these factors are things that the Vikings have to consider in their moment, as well as just making sure that if they can negotiate something with Kirk Cousins, the emotional ties are there, like I mentioned before. I think it won't be easy to negotiate a contract with Kirk Cousins and get him to take less money, maybe less years. Instead of 3 years, take 2 at, I don't know, maybe, I think you could work out 30 or 26 to 27 range with Kirk Cousins for a 3-year, 2-year deal. I think anything more than that would be pushing it for all the reasons I mentioned before. And I think Kirk Cousins would understand that just based on, the kind of person, the kind of quarterback that he's allowed everyone to see that he is. I don't think he would make it a big deal. And if they can't get a deal done, they won't get a deal done. And there won't be any ill feelings about it. But Kirk Cousins right now, in the situation that he has with the Minnesota Vikings, it's kind of just stalled out a little bit. Obviously, it'll progress more with the NFL draft or the NFL Combine coming up, and then eventually the draft and free agency officially opening up, and just all these factors like Justin Jefferson, if he's going to come to a contract agreement, all this will affect the Vikings and their future plans moving on, because not only do they have to figure out the quarterback situation, their O-line is probably their best group of guys that they have there in Minnesota, but their defense could use some work. That secondary has been an issue since, Patrick Peterson gave them one good last year with them where they were pretty good, but then he left, and then you were left with other guys that weren't really showing out the level of talent that you'd want from some of those draft picks. The linebackers as well could use some work and some pass rushing help to help out Delaney Hunter, who, again, he is another player that is unsure if he's going to return to the Minnesota Vikings. I've seen some rumors that he could be traded or just lost to free agency or not getting a contract extension done with him. So assuring the quarterback would be huge for them, and they're going to have to eventually figure that out. And they're at a point, too, where they might have to give up something or really try to tie down one of these two guys like Jefferson, really tie him down, maybe even get his deal done first just to make sure he's tied in, he can't go anywhere, he's getting paid, before figuring out these other touchy, delicate situations where if you get Cousins, you might not get this guy, or if you get this guy, Cousins might walk because there's not enough money to sign into a deal. So that's where it stands right now with the Minnesota Vikings and Kirk Cousins. It would be great if he returned there, because I think, like I mentioned, they were almost robbed to some extent this past season with the way he was playing, and I'm sure he kind of wants to show everybody that he still got it, that he was on great pace to have great numbers, and unfortunately he got injured. So I'm sure wherever he lands, I think, bearing it's not an abnormal amount of money, that he'll prove to be a good investment for any team that he lands on. But we shall see where that contract situation ends up in a few weeks, few days. Who knows with the offseason now going on. when all these things will take place. But that's going to wrap it up for segment 2. I'm going to send it to a quick break, and on the other side of that, I'm going to be talking some more free agency, the running back market this time, and some of the big name players and what their contract situations could look like with any teams that they might be going to, might be staying with, or just the whole situation overall. So don't go anywhere. It'll all be talked about after this break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we're back for the second half of the show on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Again, I mentioned I was going to talk about the running back market this offseason for some of the bigger names that are free agents this offseason. If you missed the last segment, I talked about Kirk Cousins and the Vikings, where their stall in contract negotiation is at this point, and what has led to that, some factors that could affect that, and just what could end up happening if they sign Kirk Cousins, if not, potentially paying Justin Jefferson, how that could affect, how one negotiation could affect another. So that was the last segment. Before I get into the third segment, I want to remind everyone to please, if you have any questions, want to engage with the show, want to ask me any questions during the live show, to please use the tip and donations link down below me or bigger on the left here on the screen, with any questions that you may have, so that I can see it over here on the right hand side of me and that I can engage with you guys. So the tip and donations link is down below, but if you can't see it, it's streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, if you're not able to see the link, it's streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. It just makes sure that your question gets put to the top of the feed here. I can see it and interact with the newest, most recent questions that any of you guys may have that are tuning in to watch this show. It's a big help for me, the show, the network, and the channel as well, and everybody that's working on their shows here. So that would be greatly appreciated. But like I mentioned, now we can dive into the running back market and the top free agent running backs, and just what kind of contracts they could be getting. Because if you're a football fan, if you're just follow the league in some capacity, you would know just from recent stories, narratives, just comments made about the running backs, their market is not in the greatest of spots. Just here in and around the NFL, around executives, coaches, members of organizations that don't value them as they feel that they should be. It's been made a big situation recently with guys like Derrick Henry speaking out about it, Najee Harris also being a big advocate for that, getting running backs paid the amount of money that they believe that they should be. In and around the league, there's not a lot of guys being paid crazy amount of money compared to other positions like cornerbacks, defensive tackles, outside linebackers, obviously quarterbacks, wide receivers. The money is crazy with all those guys, really, presumably all the other offensive players other than the running back. The highest earner right now for running backs is Christian McCaffrey at $16 million per year. Then it's Alvin Kamara, who just recently got his deal at $15 million. And then there's a drop-off with Derrick Henry. After his most recent contract, he's now an unrestricted free agent, but his recent contract, he was earning $12.5 million, and Nick Chubb also just got his new deal at $12.2 million as well. So you can see the drop-off there, just based on all the other contract stuff I talked about, yesterday I mentioned the defensive ends, how they're almost touching the 30s, wide receiver kind of money for some of those guys like TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett is at $25 million per year, but they're almost doubled what Kamara, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb have done. Not so much Christian McCaffrey, but Nick Bosa is earning $34 million per year, and that's more than double what Christian McCaffrey is doing. And Christian McCaffrey, I think from anybody that watched a second of football, if anybody watched one Sunday football this season, they would have known a lot about how important Christian McCaffrey was for the 49ers and how much he improved their offense just from that trade that they made, and how he just changed the narrative around the 49ers, because once they got him, everybody assumed that this team, there's no way this team could lose with the amount of weapons that they have, the O-line that they have, the coaching that they have to complement that defense. It almost seemed unfair when he went there, and a lot of people were wondering how this could have happened. And he's only making half as much as probably their second, or you can argue their first best player on their team, and Nick Bosa. Those two guys are pivotal for the 49ers, and one's making half of what the other one is, which is, you could say it's unfair. Why is it like that? A lot of people just around in the NFL just think that the traction and mileage, if you will, on running backs goes up a lot more on them than any other position in the NFL. And if you think about it, that's true to some sense, but in the other sense, it's paying the running backs for doing so much. If they're responsible for blocking, pass game, run game, just doing everything else, being on the field at all times, being a decoy in some systems, stuff like that. They do so much, and you understand why managers, general managers, coaches are hesitant to give them a lot of money, because a full season of doing that is a lot for any normal human, and these guys are trained professionals. They're trained to do this for a whole season, but doing it for multiple seasons, you could only imagine how much traction and how much soreness, pain that they could have endured to do all this. But shouldn't they get paid for doing so much, especially a guy like Christian McCaffrey, who does virtually everything for the 49ers offense? But that's a discussion for is the running back market unfair? I was going to talk about some of these guys that are looking to get paid and are looking to probably not reset the market, but trying to get paid what they feel that they deserve. So one of the biggest names that has been mentioned this offseason has been Saquon Barkley. And the New York Times posted an article, or just a report, that it's unlikely that the Giants will tag him again, or that they could work out any contract extension, most likely, because they're not going to use the tag on him again. And he's the kind of player that, again, could pretty much do everything, and his numbers might not reflect what Christian McCaffrey's numbers are, but that's just, in my opinion, because of who's around Saquon Barkley and who's around Christian McCaffrey. We'll never know if you put Saquon Barkley on the 49ers, if he puts up the same numbers, but just on the eye test, the one really good season that Saquon gave you in New York, I don't see why that's very far off the realm of possibility, thinking that that Saquon could do similar sort of things. Another high name in the free agency market is Derrick Henry. Josh Jacobs and Tony Pollard are the main guys, I think. And SportRack doesn't have any of these guys making more than $10 million a year. It doesn't have, and it also doesn't have any of them signing a deal that goes past each of their respected ages of 30 or 32, because Derrick Henry is, I think he's 30. If he didn't just turn 30, he's about to, and he's 29. But SportRack had any contract that he gets, they estimated it to be around 2 years, $9 million to $10 million for a guy of that level, who has been carrying the running back reputation for so many years now in Tennessee. Another guy that you could argue, if he's not there in Tennessee, I don't think we'd be talking about Tennessee as much as we have been in some of these close games that they've been in. Mike Vrabel did everything that he could to make sure that Derrick Henry was the identity of that offense, of that team. They were going to run it at you 1,000 times, kill the clock, and give your offense minimal possessions to win the game. And just that pivotal piece to then say he's not going to get paid more than $10 million, which is fourth on this list of running backs, highest paid earners in the NFL, is kind of crazy, but it just goes back to that age thing, right? A lot of these executive people think that past the age of 30, if these running backs are getting drafted at 23, a lot of them stay for a lot more years, 23, or maybe at the earliest, I should have said like 20, 21. By the time you get to 30, you can only imagine the traction, the pain, injuries you could have suffered in that time being a running back, physical, especially a physical back like Derrick Henry. He is getting punished a lot more than these sort of scat back, agile guys that will beat you more with their speed and not take as much context as Derrick Henry. And he is already off of a deal that I mentioned. He's getting $12.5 million. He already signed his second deal after his rookie contract, so he's looking for another deal because he, I assume, believes that he could play at least 2 to 3 more years, and he's looking for that kind of last contract to get paid for almost his reputation. I'm assuming he's going to bring to the table, saying, look what I did here, what I could bring to another organization potentially based on what his reputation says. It won't be for long, but at least he has that to build on. With guys like Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and Tony Pollard, they haven't signed any other deal. And Saquon's been in the league now for 5 years. And unfortunately, that's something that these other teams are going to hold against them. He's been with the Giants all 5 years. He's gotten some pretty serious injuries, some pretty bad injuries to his ankle, to his ACL, and he hasn't gotten a big payday like Derrick Henry has. He's still on his rookie deal, and it could seem unfair to some extent, thinking that because they even franchised him tag last year, so he was forced to play another year for $10 million, which was the franchise tag price last year, to now he's about to be 26, if I remember correctly, or he's 27, and he's only going to get one more contract, most likely, from a contender that wants to make him a pivotal part to their team, and that's just the nature of the game. If that's the business side of the game for most of these guys, especially the running backs, because they get tagged and then they could only get one big contract, and after that, it's just looking for minimal contract on a minimal amount of years that they could benefit off of, but their talents, their abilities that they've shown in the past show that they could do much more. But just based on what SportRack says, the market that's been laid out for some of these guys, it's going to be tough for a Saquon and a Derrick Henry, and even Austin Eckler, who's 28 years old, has had some great season with the Chargers, but after this rough year, put this rough year on top of all the mileage that he's carried, and I don't think a lot of teams will jump on the opportunity to get an Austin Eckler for not for the price of 10 or even 9 million maybe. I think he could squeeze out 8 million per year, but the franchise tag is set at about 10, and if it's just going to be for 1 year, why pay Austin Eckler 1 year if you could just ride out the running backs they currently have 4 more years, and then you could tag them and then find somebody else to replace them with. And it's not ideal for these running backs. It's not a good thing from where I stand, how the running back market has kind of panned out, but that's where these guys are. Even the younger guys like Jacobs and Tony Pollard have less mileage, but you combine that with the rough season that they just finished having. Josh Jacobs had been injured. He was up and down this entire last season, coming off of a great season that he had 2 years before. Now, that would have been great if he topped it off with another solid season this year, but he didn't. And, managers, coaches, and everyone's going to hold that against him. Probably not pay him more than 10 or 11-ish. They're not going to be jumping at the opportunity, which is why I think Jacobs is most likely going to stay with the Raiders. They have something building there with Antonio Pierce, and I don't see a contender jumping on their horse to try and go get Josh Jacobs because of his production and the injuries that he's had and because of the market. Same thing with Tony Pollard. I see him leaving the Cowboys just because a lot has been said about his style. He's not built for being the Cowboys running back. He's not the sort of style that they sought in that position. Derrick Henry's been linked to the Cowboys, but they have to figure all that out with their free agents and seeing what the market kind of lays out for. But I presume Tony Pollard will eventually leave, as will Saquon Barkley, like I mentioned, and probably Derrick Henry as well. And, Tony Pollard, he could end up being with the Giants or something like that. Once Saquon leaves and they have some familiarity there with Tony Pollard, I can see that move happening. But it's just rough where the market stands now for the running backs. They're not projected to make a lot of money, and a lot of these guys will only get one large contract in their careers. And it almost seems like everything they do, if they mess up once, it holds them accountable for a lot more than it does for other positions in football. So that's kind of where the market stands out right now. It's not looking great for these running backs, but some of them could be great pieces on contenders for 3 to 4 years, and then they can move on. It won't be a big risk for some of these contenders to take, like the Texans. I would love, like I mentioned yesterday, if they had Saquon Barkley on that team, because they get out for 3 years, they have a good amount of cap space, and it won't hurt them to sign him, and they're going to get his talent at a premium price of most likely $10 to $11 million per year. And if Derrick Henry does end up going to the Cowboys, it all fits into that plan I mentioned on this show before too, that they should go all in this season, right at the contracts of Mike McCarthy and Dak, because I don't think Dak should be getting a lot of money, a contract extension from them for $60 million like it was reported. If you get Derrick Henry for a year or two, write all those guys out, it would be hard and it would not be ideal to restart everything, but at least you're not tied to one of these guys for a lot longer than you think. But let me know where you guys think some of these running backs will go, how impactful they'll be on other teams if they were to move, and just anything related to them would be great as well. We're going to go to the final break of the show, and on the other side, we're going to talk a little bit more about Justin Fields, his situation with the Bears, and why I think it could have been a lot. It has to do a lot more with a mutual decision, mutual reasons for the fault of this not going as a lot of people predicted. So don't go anywhere. That'll be up next after this final break. Back here for the final time in the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Diving right into this final segment, the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields fallout. Ever since Justin Fields got to the Chicago Bears, it's been the typical situation for, the organization that was looking for a fresh change, a fresh start, trying to build something from the foundation up with a generational type of talent like Justin Fields was, or is, I shouldn't say was. But they jumped on the opportunity, trade up with the Giants to take the number 11 pick and give the Giants some compensation for that, and take Justin Fields ahead of teams like the Giants, the Eagles, and other teams in that 2021 draft. And they went all in on this guy. He was going to be the franchise. He had the talent. He certainly has the talent to be that. Everybody thought that he did, and he showed some flashes, but it never really developed into anything more serious. He got hurt a lot this past season and the seasons before, and now we're at a point where they have the number 1 pick again, and it's crazy to me how they're trying to do almost the exact same thing with virtually the same level of talent on that roster, and expecting something else differently to happen. If you look back to that draft, that 2021 draft, Trevor Lawrence went first overall, Zach Wilson went 2, Trey Lance 3rd, Mac Jones went 15, and Justin Fields went 11. Other than Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields has been clearly the best quarterback out of those other ones that were drafted in the first round. And in terms of Trevor Lawrence, comparing him to Justin Fields, they will always be tied, at least in my mind, in some aspect, because of not only them being drafted in the same draft, but they played against each other just months before the draft in the college football playoffs, where Fields' Ohio State played Trevor Lawrence's Clemson in that game. It was probably one of the best playoff games I've seen from two generational type of quarterbacks, both being drafted there in a few months, for them to face off like that with two of the best teams in college football. It was phenomenal to see. And Fields had probably one of the best performances in a playoff game where he outplayed Trevor Lawrence. I think he threw for over 400 yards. I'm almost sure of it. And he threw six touchdowns in that game. And a lot of people would want to forget or tend to forget that when Trevor Lawrence was drafted to the Jaguars, his head coach was Urban Meyer. And I don't think I have to explain to anybody how that situation went with Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence. In that first season, it wasn't great. It was far from that, actually. And it was similar to Justin Fields' situation with Matt Nagy in Chicago. And now you're looking at these two quarterbacks, like, they're not having the level of success that people expected them to. And the Jaguars actually did something about it. They went out and got Doug Peterson, an experienced coach, a good offensive mind, went to the Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. Now he's taken on this challenge of developing Trevor Lawrence, and under him, it's been nothing but great things for Trevor Lawrence and that development. The Jaguars invested a lot in helping him out, drafting his teammate in college, Travis Etienne, improving that O-line, getting him some weapons, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, now Calvin Ridley, and a defense to support them in moments where their offense might not be great. Yeah, the defense is definitely young, and it's not a top unit, but they did something to support Trevor Lawrence in the moment where, or in those years where he needed it the most. People just didn't give up on him. There was that change from Urban Meyer to Doug Peterson, but that was virtually the only change that happened for the Jaguars. And Justin Fields, on the other end of the spectrum, hasn't really had that security, that support that I believe the Bears failed him in, I guess, is the term that I'm trying to use, for a lack of a better term. He hasn't really had a qualified head coach, at least not to the level of Doug Peterson that Trevor Lawrence had in those years where they're developing and they need that structure to have a sound voice in their ear, guide them through this process of being in the NFL, being the guy on an NFL football team. Just look at Patrick Mahomes. He was very raw coming out of college, but he had Andy Reid, one of the best coaches in NFL history, and look where he ended up. Now, I'm not saying Justin Fields has that talent level of Patrick Mahomes. I don't think you can say anybody does, but it shows a lot. I think Patrick Mahomes could be in a lot different situation if he didn't have Andy Reid and didn't have that organization to support him and have all those weapons that he had available to him that Justin Fields really didn't. On the topic that I mentioned of Matt Nagy, funny enough, he had success with Kansas City, but he wasn't suited to be a head coach or run an offense, a whole team, in my opinion. For Fields at the time, his record after his time spent in Chicago was 22-27 as a head coach, and I actually wasn't aware of this, that no offensive coordinator has lasted more than 2 seasons as the offensive coordinator of the Bills, except for two times in their whole history. Most recently in 2009 was the last time an offensive coordinator lasted more than 2 years as the offensive coordinator in Chicago. And not only to add to that, they finally made the decision to get rid of Matt Nagy, get some new leadership in there, some new guidance for Justin Fields, but they went out and got Matt Eberflus, and it's again a case of not, I guess, recruiting well, not doing your homework well enough to find a guy that's more offensively based than Eberflus was, because he was a defensive coach. He had only been a defensive coordinator and a linebacker coach before his time as the Bears head coach. He's now currently 10-24 as a head coach, and he had never had any head coaching experience before this time in Chicago. And that's another topic that I won't get into now, but a lot of times these head coaches get their first opportunities with these organizations that might not be the best, might not be ready for success right now, and not only do they not have success, but they could potentially hinder the growth and development of a young quarterback that needs wiser, better guidance in their journey to being one of the top guys. That I get it. Someone has to give Matt Eberflus their first chance, and it had to be the Chicago Bears. And I just don't think it panned out again, because it doesn't line up with what kind of coach I believe that Justin Fields needs. A more offensive-minded guy to really use his talents to the best of his abilities. That's why you see Justin Fields now being rumored to be traded to the Falcons. The Pittsburgh Steelers are the two biggest ones that I've seen, because they have the offensive power and the offensive scheme really fit to hone in on the skills of Justin Fields and use it to the best of their abilities. With Justin Fields, he could increase that run game in Atlanta by at least triple of the production that they have now with Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and if you add Justin Fields' running ability to that, no wonder why a lot of people, especially in Atlanta, are almost salivating at the chance of getting Justin Fields there, back in his home state, or back in Atlanta. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers as well, Justin Fields, fine, you want to say that he's a running quarterback. His arm's not that great, but I don't think it's worse than what Ryan Tannehill had in his years with Arthur Smith there. And now he's an offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if you're telling me that Arthur Smith had success, playoff success, with Ryan Tannehill, that he can't do the same with Justin Fields, who, again, I think in my opinion that I don't think I could name more than 6 guys more talented than Justin Fields currently in the NFL. Just off the top of my head, it's Patrick Mahomes, if you want to throw Herbert, Burrow, Brock Purdy, you want to throw him in there, Jared Goff, Lamar Jackson. That might be it. Honestly, Josh Allen, that's 7. But then other than that, I don't think he's less talented than Tua or Dak Prescott, that are not only getting paid a lot, but the difference is that they're on great teams. They have great support around them. Josh Allen has Diggs, Mahomes has Kelsey, Herbert had Keenan Allen and Mike Williams for a time. Joe Burrow had Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. Jared Goff now, once he got some support, a lot more support in Detroit, as they built up the roster. Amon-Ra was brought there. He kind of came up and helped Goff. They signed David Montgomery, drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. Sam Laporta now also an option for Jared Goff, and now he's one of the top quarterbacks in the NFC. And again, it all just goes to the point where, yes, I'm not trying to downplay what Caleb Williams can be, what kind of talent he is. I'm not saying any of that, but for some people to think that it's all potentially on Justin Fields, that it had to do with him, this is why this didn't work, and almost think that the Bears have no choice but to draft Caleb Williams because they don't have a capable quarterback. I think that's where the judgment gets misguided and misjudged by a lot of people in the NFL, because in my opinion, I think if they keep Fields, it might work out better for them. They could trade out of the one spot. It's probably not likely because, it's the one spot. For a team to trade out of the one spot and have Caleb Williams coming in, I think it would be crazy. But it does feel unfortunate for Justin Fields that the Bears have the one spot and now he's kind of given really little to no shot of staying, kind of proving himself, and having the Bears bank on him to really invest in him going forward. But that's kind of where I stand on the situation. Just coming on here to reiterate how, it could be Justin Fields' fault. I'm not saying he's been perfect, that he's been done wrong by any sense, but to think that it's all been on him, I think that's where we kind of split ways in that way of thinking. But again, let me know what you guys think. I always try to make these last topics a more opinion-based, sort of discussion-based topic for you guys to engage with. And let me know what you guys think on anything I said or just the topic in general. But that seems to be all the time I have for you guys today. I want to thank all of you again for tuning in to this episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your engagement means a lot to not only me, but to us. So please remember to subscribe, like, and comment on the show, as well as following us on other social media networks like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok for more of this content. And if you want to see more episodes, you can catch the whole episode on the Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel. There's individual segments, there's YouTube shorts for you guys to engage with and see any more discussions, storylines around the NFL. But for now, I've been your host, Manny Maradiege, wishing you guys a good rest of your evening or good rest of your day, and I will see you guys all tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go